He had always been a man who liked quiet weekends. The world felt too loud, too fast, and too full of things he had no control over. So, when he first saw a small ad in the local newspaper about a metal detector for sale at a garage sale, something in him sparked. He didn't know much about treasure hunting or history, but the idea of wandering through open spaces, exploring forgotten corners, and maybe finding something hidden excited him. It felt simple, peaceful, and completely his own. He bought the metal detector that morning. It was old, a little scratched, but it hummed with a strange energy. The seller had chuckled when he asked if it worked well and assured him it had found more coins and trinkets than anyone could count. He left the garage sale feeling lighter than he had in weeks, carrying the detector with a kind of anticipation he hadn't felt since he was a boy, exploring fields behind his old school. The backyard was large, far bigger than most in the neighborhood and slightly uneven. Grass grew thick and wild in some areas, and patches of dirt were scattered around where the ground seemed to have shifted over time. He imagined all kinds of things buried beneath the soil: old coins, rusty tools, maybe even a forgotten toy or two from decades past. It was enough to make him eager, his mind buzzing with curiosity as he carried the detector out into the open. He set it down gently on the grass, adjusted the headphones, and flicked the switch. A soft hum began, and the small screen flickered to life. The sun was warm on his back, the kind of early afternoon sun that made the air feel alive but calm at the same time. He stepped forward, sweeping the detector slowly over the uneven ground, listening intently to every beep and hum it made. He imagined himself as an explorer, uncovering secrets left behind by time itself. Hours passed. He found coins, mostly old pennies and nickels, bits of metal, and once, a tiny rusted key that might have opened an old shed or a piece of furniture. Each discovery gave him a small thrill, a proof that his quiet afternoons could hold surprises. He talked to himself sometimes, muttering about how he would clean off the dirt and maybe frame the coins, imagining them as little trophies of patience and persistence. The yard stretched far behind him, reaching the boundary where an old oak tree cast long shadows. He walked toward it, the detector humming in a steady rhythm. And then, suddenly, the beeping changed. It wasn't the soft, irregular ping of scattered metal anymore. This was sharp, insistent, and louder than anything he had heard that afternoon. He stopped, heart quickening, and moved the detector in small circles over the ground. The sound grew more urgent, almost as if the machine was trying to tell him something. He knelt down, brushing the grass and dirt aside with his hands, careful not to damage anything beneath. The soil felt unusually compact in one spot, almost unnatural. He dug slowly, methodically, the metal detector humming beside him, as if it shared his anticipation. Minutes passed, and then the edge of something hard appeared beneath the soil. He froze, staring at the dark, angular shape. He had expected coins, maybe a metal box, but this was different. His pulse quickened, a mix of fear and excitement rushing through him. He grabbed a small trowel from the shed and began to dig more carefully, revealing more of the object. Dirt fell away, and he could make out the curve of what looked like a roof, dark with rust and age. His mind raced. How could a car, if that's what it was, be buried in his backyard? He thought of the previous owners, of neighbors, of stories that might explain it, but nothing made sense. The shape was unmistakable, a smooth curved top that gleamed dully under the sunlight once the dirt was cleared. He brushed off more soil, uncovering a door handle, then part of a fender. His hands shook slightly, both from the effort and from the disbelief. He stepped back and looked at the sight before him. A car, or at least the remnants of one, seemed to be lying just beneath the surface, hidden for years. Questions swirled in his mind. Who had put it there? Why? How had no one noticed until now? The thought of a story, a hidden secret buried right in his own backyard, made his head spin with curiosity and unease. He decided to take a break, leaning on the handle of his trowel, breathing in the cool air that felt suddenly heavier with mystery. The yard that had seemed ordinary a few hours ago was now a place of suspense and potential discovery. Even the birds seemed quieter, the wind gentler, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He couldn't resist the urge to keep going, to uncover more of whatever lay beneath, though a small part of him wondered if he was getting in over his head. After a short break, he returned to the spot, rolling up his sleeves and gripping the trowel tightly. He worked methodically, uncovering more of the car, revealing the hood and part of the windshield. The metal was corroded, and the glass clouded with age, but it was unmistakable. He marveled at the careful way it must have been buried. This wasn't an accident or a forgotten vehicle left to decay naturally. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide it here. As he worked, he thought about calling a neighbor or even the authorities, but he hesitated. Part of him wanted to see the discovery through on his own, to understand it first before anyone else turned it into a story or a problem. He felt a strange mix of excitement and responsibility. This was something unusual, something that had been waiting for him to find it, and he didn't want to ruin the moment with outside interference just yet. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the yard. Sweat ran down his back, dirt under his nails, but he barely noticed. Every movement revealed more of the car, more of the mystery. The front bumper, the faded paint, the tires buried deep in soil that had long since turned to dust. Each detail fascinated him. He couldn't help but imagine who had owned it, why it had ended up here, and what stories it could tell if it could speak. Evening approached, and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, but he didn't want to stop. He was caught in the thrill of discovery, the feeling that he was uncovering a secret no one else knew. Every bit of dirt removed was like peeling back a layer of time itself, revealing a story that had been hidden, waiting for the right person to stumble upon it. As darkness slowly fell, he finally paused, leaning against the edge of the hole he had dug. The outline of the car was clear now, a dark, mysterious shape resting under the yard. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, feeling a mix of fatigue and exhilaration. He knew he would have to continue tomorrow, but for now, he just stood there, staring at the object that had transformed his ordinary afternoon into something extraordinary. The backyard, once just a patch of grass and dirt, had become a place of mystery, of possibility, of secrets long buried and waiting to be uncovered. He could barely sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faint outline of the car under his yard, hidden like a secret no one had ever noticed. The idea of what it might contain kept spinning in his mind, creating a mix of excitement and unease that made it impossible to rest. When morning finally came, he jumped out of bed, forgetting breakfast and coffee, and hurried outside to continue his work. The air was crisp and cool, and the light of the early morning sun cast a soft glow on the yard. The dirt he had uncovered the day before had dried and cracked slightly, but the shape of the car was unmistakable. He knelt beside it, brushing away the loose soil, and stared at the metal roof. The rust had eaten into parts of it, but there was no mistaking the form of a vehicle buried so carefully beneath the earth. He felt a shiver run down his spine, not from the cold, but from the strange sense of discovery. He thought about what kind of car it might be, trying to imagine its history. It seemed old, maybe from the 70s or 80s. The lines of the body were faded and bent from years underground, yet the craftsmanship still showed through. His curiosity was a weight he couldn't put down, a pull that made his hands itch to uncover more. With a trowel in hand, he began to dig around the edges of the car. Each scoop of soil revealed more details: the edge of a door, a dented fender, the hint of a tire. He was careful, methodical, not wanting to damage anything that might be fragile after being buried for so long. The metal detector lay beside him, quiet now, like it had fulfilled its purpose. He almost wanted it to beep again, but deep down he knew this was bigger than any small signal. Neighbors occasionally walked by, giving him curious glances, but no one stopped. He didn't mention the car to anyone, not yet. Part of him wanted this moment to be entirely his own, a secret that he would unravel piece by piece. The idea of sharing it felt premature, almost like spoiling the surprise of a story halfway through. So he continued alone, talking to himself quietly about what he found, imagining the car's journey from the day it was first driven to the day it had been buried. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. He had uncovered most of the roof and part of the hood, but the bulk of the car remained buried. Dirt was clinging to the tires, and the paint had faded into dull patches of rust and brown. He paused for a moment, wiping sweat from his forehead, and looked at the piece of history he had revealed. It was strange to think that something so large and solid could stay hidden for so long, invisible under his feet, waiting for him to find it. He decided to dig a little deeper, moving carefully toward what he suspected was the trunk. The soil was compact, heavier than he had expected, and it resisted his efforts. He leaned on the trowel, taking a deep breath, and pushed forward slowly. Dirt and small stones fell away, revealing more of the car's shape. The metal was bent and corroded in places, but the overall structure remained. He ran his hand along the edge of the trunk, feeling the cold, rough surface beneath his fingers. It sent a shiver through him, a mix of fear and excitement that he couldn't shake. He thought about what might be inside. He told himself it could be tools, old luggage, or perhaps even some forgotten belongings. The idea of finding something personal, something that told a story of someone else's life, was thrilling. Yet there was also an unease he couldn't dismiss. Buried things often had reasons to stay hidden, and he felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. What he would find could be amazing, or it could be disturbing. Still, he couldn't stop now. The curiosity had taken root, and it demanded satisfaction. As he dug further, he noticed that the car had been buried with surprising precision. The ground around it was undisturbed, except for the soil he had removed himself. It was as if someone had carefully placed it there and left it, covering it with layers of earth that had settled over decades. This thought made him pause and imagine who might have done such a thing, why they would hide a car like this in an ordinary backyard, and what stories had been lost in the process. The more he thought, the more mysterious it became. Lunch came and went, but he barely noticed. He moved mechanically, focused entirely on uncovering the trunk and seeing what lay inside. He imagined the first person to put it there, thinking of their intentions and the life they had led. He wondered if they had meant it as a prank, an act of concealment, or something far more serious. The possibilities swirled in his mind, keeping him on edge yet intensely engaged. By mid-afternoon, he had cleared enough soil to fully expose the trunk lid. It was a faded, rusty piece of metal, and the handle was almost hidden under layers of dirt and corrosion. He knelt in front of it, feeling the weight of the moment. Taking a deep breath, he pried gently at the latch, surprised at how stiff it was. Years of soil and decay had fused it almost completely shut. He worked slowly, carefully, and finally, with a small, reluctant creak, the trunk lid gave way slightly. He froze. The darkness inside seemed to stare back at him, a black void that made his heart race. He had expected old tools, perhaps a forgotten box, but this was different. The air smelled stale, like it had been trapped there for decades. He could see shapes inside, but the details were obscured by shadows. Fear and curiosity battled in his mind, but he couldn't pull away. He had come too far to turn back now. He fetched a flashlight from the shed, shining it into the trunk. Dust motes floated in the beam, and the light revealed a jumble of objects that were difficult to identify. Rusted metal parts, pieces of fabric, and something that looked like it had once been clothing were piled together. The realization hit him slowly. This wasn't just a buried car. It was a container of forgotten stories. A time capsule of someone else's life that had been hidden away intentionally. He leaned back, his mind racing. He felt both exhilarated and uneasy. There was a strange thrill in knowing he had uncovered something no one else had seen in decades, but the mystery of why it had been buried here gnawed at him. Every thought led to more questions. How long had it been here? Who had owned the car? What had they intended by hiding it? His imagination ran wild, weaving stories and scenarios, each one more compelling than the last. Hours passed as he examined the trunk carefully, making notes in his mind about what he could see and what might be inside. He knew he couldn't uncover everything at once, and the weight of the mystery hung over him like a shadow. Even as the day ended and the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard, he felt an undeniable pull to return and continue the exploration. The car, buried for decades, had transformed his ordinary backyard into a place of suspense and wonder, and he couldn't wait to see what secrets it still held. He woke up before dawn, his mind still racing from the discoveries of the previous day. The car in his backyard had become an obsession. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover, more to understand, and he was desperate to see what lay hidden. Breakfast was forgotten, the coffee untouched. He dressed quickly, grabbed his tools, and stepped into the chilly morning air, the yard waiting like a secret that demanded to be revealed. The first thing he noticed was how different the car felt in the early light. The shadows stretched long across the yard, emphasizing its shape, its presence. It was no longer just a heap of rusted metal. It was something almost alive, a remnant of the past that had been waiting for him. He ran his hands along the roof again, feeling the cold, uneven surface beneath his fingers. Every scratch and dent told a story he could only imagine, a life that had once been vibrant but now lay forgotten beneath the soil. He focused on the trunk, the place that had caused both curiosity and unease. Yesterday he had pried it open just enough to catch a glimpse of what was inside, but now he wanted to explore fully. He knelt down and brushed away the loose soil around the edges, careful not to damage anything. The metal was brittle in places, and he worked with slow, deliberate movements, aware that even a small mistake could ruin years of history buried in the dirt. As he lifted the lid further, his breath caught. The interior of the trunk was dark, heavy with the smell of decay, dust, and something he couldn't quite name. Shapes were piled together, indistinct in the shadows, and he could feel the weight of the unknown pressing against him. He turned on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness and revealing details he hadn't seen the day before. Inside were items that looked old and worn, pieces of clothing, perhaps once folded neatly, now crumpled and faded, rusted metal objects that might have been tools or parts of the car itself. A small, broken suitcase lay in the corner, its fabric torn and dirty. He leaned closer, careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily, his mind racing with possibilities. Each item seemed to hold a fragment of a story, and he wanted to know them all. He thought about the person who had buried this car, imagining their life, their intentions. Did they intend for someone to find it someday? Or had it been a desperate act to hide something they didn't want anyone to see? The questions multiplied, and with each one his curiosity deepened. He felt like an archaeologist uncovering a time capsule, a witness to a story frozen in the past. Hours passed as he carefully examined the contents, documenting in his mind what he could see. Every small object, every detail of the trunk seemed to whisper secrets. He wondered about the car's journey, how it had ended up in this backyard and why it had remained hidden for so long. Each thought made the mystery more compelling, more urgent, as if the past itself was reaching out to him through the metal and soil. He took breaks occasionally, leaning against the edge of the trunk and letting the morning sun warm his back. Even in those moments of rest, his mind did not quiet. He imagined the world the car had come from, the lives it had touched, and the reasons it had been buried. It was impossible not to think about the people involved, the emotions, the decisions, and the events that had led to this strange, hidden scene. As the day wore on, he began to clear the dirt around the front of the car. The hood was heavy and corroded, but he managed to lift it carefully. Underneath, he found more clues: old engine parts, tools that had been left behind, and small personal items tucked in the corners. Each discovery added layers to the story, fragments of a life that had been concealed beneath the earth. He marveled at how meticulous the burial had been, and how thoroughly it had been hidden from the world above. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that this was not a simple abandoned vehicle. The care with which it had been buried suggested intention, thought, and secrecy. It was as if someone had gone to great lengths to protect something, and now he was the one entrusted with its revelation. The weight of that realization made his heart pound, a mixture of fear and awe. He paused again, sitting on the grass and looking at the car as a whole. The way it lay in the yard, half exposed and yet still holding its secrets, was mesmerizing. He thought about how ordinary the yard had seemed before, how unremarkable it had appeared to anyone walking by. Now it was transformed into a place of intrigue and discovery, a link to a past that no one alive might have remembered. He felt a strange connection to the people who had hidden it, and a sense of responsibility to uncover the truth carefully and respectfully. By afternoon, he had decided to focus on the interior of the car itself. The doors were stiff and rusted, but he managed to pry one open with a crowbar, careful not to damage the frame. Inside, the seats were faded and torn, the upholstery brittle with age. Dust and dirt covered everything, but it was possible to see remnants of what had been left behind. Papers, small personal effects, a faint imprint of a life once lived within these walls of metal. He explored slowly, documenting everything in his mind, taking care not to rush. Each piece he examined added to the narrative he was constructing, a story that was only partially visible but growing more vivid with every passing hour. He imagined the car driving down empty streets, carrying a family or a solitary driver, feeling the wind through the windows, unaware that decades later it would be hidden beneath soil in someone else's backyard. The shadows lengthened as the sun began to set, and he realized he had spent the entire day immersed in the discovery. Fatigue weighed on his body, but his mind was alive with questions and possibilities. He stood and stepped back, looking at the car in its partially uncovered state. It was a monument to a past life, a reminder of secrets kept and stories untold. He felt a mixture of exhaustion, exhilaration, and a profound respect for the hidden history he had uncovered. Even as darkness approached, he knew he would return tomorrow. There was too much left to explore, too much to understand. The trunk, the interior, the small personal items, all promised revelations that were just beyond his grasp. He could feel the story waiting for him, ready to unfold piece by piece, and he was determined to see it through. The backyard, once ordinary and quiet, had become a place of mystery and suspense, a stage for a story that had waited decades to be discovered. He returned the next morning with a determination he could not shake. The backyard, now half dug and transformed by his previous day's work, seemed alive with anticipation. Every step he took toward the car was measured, careful and reverent. It was as if the soil itself were holding its breath, waiting for him to uncover the next piece of its story. He knelt by the trunk once more, his hands dirty from yesterday's efforts but steady now, driven by a mixture of curiosity and a subtle fear of the unknown. The trunk, which had given him only a glimpse before, was now the focus of his attention. He brushed away the loose soil along the edges, removing layers that had collected over decades. The metal groaned slightly as he pressed it open further, releasing a soft, reluctant hiss. Dust rose into the early morning light, sparkling faintly as it floated above the dark interior. He felt a shiver of anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment where curiosity could finally reveal the truth. He reached into the trunk carefully, moving aside old metal fragments and worn fabric. His fingers brushed something unusual, heavier than the rest of the items he had seen before. He paused, holding his breath. The shape was irregular, as if it belonged to something that had once been alive. For a moment, he considered stepping back, telling himself to call someone else, but the pull of discovery was too strong. He couldn't turn away now. As he continued to clear the space, the shape became more defined. It was unmistakable in its form, yet covered in debris and age. He leaned in closer, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The reality of what lay before him hit him slowly, a combination of disbelief, fear, and fascination. He could see bones, carefully wrapped in decayed cloth. The details were hard to look at, and yet he couldn't tear his eyes away. He realized that the trunk was not just a storage space. It was a container of a life long hidden. He leaned back slightly, trying to catch his breath. His heart raced, not just from the physical effort of digging and lifting, but from the realization of the gravity of his discovery. He had uncovered something that had been hidden intentionally, a secret kept for years, perhaps decades. The air seemed heavier around him, filled with a silent tension. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This was no longer a simple backyard excavation. It was a connection to a life and a story that demanded respect. Carefully, he continued to clear the area, moving bits of rusted metal and dirt that had accumulated on top of the remains. Each movement revealed more detail, more evidence of a story that had been lost in time. He noticed the careful placement, the way the trunk had been arranged to conceal what was inside. It was deliberate, meticulous, and the thought sent chills down his spine. Someone had wanted this hidden, and he had now become the first witness in decades. He took a moment to step back and breathe, letting the weight of the discovery sink in. He thought about the family that might have been involved, the lives touched, and the questions that could never be answered fully. Who had put the car here? Why had it been buried? And who had once belonged to the life now revealed in the darkness of the trunk? Each question seemed heavier than the last, and he felt both awe and sorrow as he considered them. The morning passed, and he worked carefully, moving the remains with utmost respect. He noted that the trunk contained a few personal items, now faded and decayed, that might have been part of the person's life. Pieces of cloth, perhaps clothing, small trinkets that had survived the years underground. Each object seemed to speak, whispering fragments of a story that was long buried. He imagined the hands that had once held these items, the life that had been lived, and the sudden silence that followed. As he cleared more of the trunk, he felt a sense of connection, a strange closeness to the unknown person whose remains he had uncovered. It was a humbling experience to touch a life that had existed long before he had arrived. The weight of mortality pressed upon him, a reminder of how fleeting life could be, and how quickly it could be hidden from the world. He was careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily, knowing that every action mattered. Hours slipped by as he worked methodically. He paused occasionally, sitting on the grass, letting the sunlight warm his back and thinking about the series of events that had led to this moment. The discovery had changed his perspective entirely. What had begun as a hobby, a simple curiosity with a metal detector, had turned into a connection with history, mystery, and human life itself. The backyard, once ordinary, now held layers of secrets he was slowly peeling away. By afternoon, he had managed to document the contents as best he could in his mind. He didn't have a camera, and even if he did, he knew photographs could never capture the full weight of the moment. It was something he would carry with him, a story imprinted in memory and emotion. The objects, the arrangement, the careful concealment, all told a story of intention, secrecy, and perhaps desperation. He realized he had a choice to make. This discovery was beyond personal curiosity. It was something that needed to be reported. The weight of the responsibility settled on him, and he felt a strange sense of duty. He took a deep breath and stood, brushing off the dirt from his hands and looking at the trunk one last time before deciding that he would call the authorities. The story buried in the yard was larger than him now, and it was time to let others take part in uncovering the truth. Even as he made the call, a part of him lingered by the car, reluctant to leave. The trunk remained open, the remnants inside still hidden partially by shadows waiting to tell their story. He knew that his life would never be the same, that this ordinary backyard had transformed into a place where the past and present intersected in ways he could barely comprehend. The discovery had been shocking, unnerving, and strangely exhilarating all at once, and he knew that the unfolding investigation would reveal even more about the hidden history beneath his feet. He watched as the first responders arrived, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. They approached the car with the careful professionalism he had imagined, and he explained what he had found. Every detail he shared seemed to matter, every observation a key to understanding the hidden story. He felt a sense of closure in having finally reported the discovery, yet part of him knew the story was just beginning. The buried car had revealed its first secret, but the truth behind it would take time to fully uncover. The day after the authorities had been contacted, the backyard felt different. What had been his quiet place of curiosity and weekend leisure now held an almost reverent silence. People had begun to take notice, but he had asked them to give space, to let the investigation unfold without interference. The car, the buried secret that had consumed his thoughts for days, was now in the care of professionals who seemed as fascinated as he had been, though they approached it with calm precision. He stayed at a distance, watching as the investigators examined the car. Each movement they made was deliberate, careful, and respectful, as if they too understood the gravity of the discovery. The trunk, now fully opened, revealed its contents to trained eyes. While he had already seen the shocking interior, it was different to watch someone else observe it, noting the same details, piecing together the story from fragments long hidden beneath the soil. It became clear that the car had been involved in a missing persons case from decades earlier. The report confirmed what he had feared and suspected. The trunk had held a long-lost life, a person who had disappeared without a trace. The revelation was sobering, the weight of it settling heavily on his shoulders. He had stumbled upon a tragedy, yet his discovery had opened the door to answers that had been denied for years. He spent the morning speaking with the investigators, recounting the moments of his discovery, the way he had unearthed the car, the exact location and condition of the trunk. Every detail mattered, every observation a potential clue. His role, he realized, had shifted from a curious hobbyist to an essential witness in the resolution of a decades-old mystery. The feeling was strange and humbling. A simple hobby had led him to a truth that mattered far beyond himself. As the day wore on, he learned more about the case. The person who had disappeared had been missing for decades, leaving families and loved ones in limbo, never knowing the fate of their relative. His discovery brought both closure and sorrow, a mix of emotions that he struggled to process. Yet amidst the sadness, there was also a quiet sense of relief that the mystery was finally being addressed. The truth, however painful, could finally come to light. The car itself was carefully removed from the yard by the investigators. It was lifted with precision, each movement deliberate, ensuring that nothing inside was disturbed unnecessarily. He watched as the vehicle, once hidden beneath layers of dirt and time, was brought into the open, its story finally beginning to unfold fully. The sight was both unsettling and fascinating, a tangible connection between the past and the present. He stayed nearby as evidence was collected, noting how the items in the trunk were handled with care. Old clothing, personal effects, and the skeletal remains were documented meticulously. Every small fragment contributed to the story of a life that had been hidden, and he marveled at the diligence of the team tasked with uncovering the truth. It was a reminder that even the smallest details could carry meaning, that patience and care could reveal secrets long buried. Throughout the day, he reflected on his own role in the unfolding story. He had begun the journey with curiosity, a desire to explore his backyard and perhaps find a forgotten coin or relic. Yet fate had guided him toward something far greater, something that would change lives beyond his own. The thought that his small actions had uncovered decades of mystery left him feeling both humbled and strangely proud. He had been a witness to history in a way he had never anticipated. As evening approached, he walked through the yard alone, now quiet after the activity of the day. The soil where the car had been buried was disturbed, a reminder of the secret that had been brought to light. He touched the edge of the hole gently, imagining the years it had lain hidden beneath the surface, invisible to everyone else. The experience had given him a new appreciation for the stories that lay beneath ordinary places, the hidden histories waiting for discovery by those patient and curious enough to look. He thought about the families who would receive closure, the people whose questions had lingered for decades. His discovery had bridged the gap between the past and present, offering answers that had been long denied. The knowledge that he had played a role in bringing truth to light filled him with a quiet satisfaction, even as the gravity of the situation remained heavy on his mind. It was a reminder of the unexpected ways life could change, how ordinary days could lead to extraordinary events. Over the following weeks, he continued to follow the investigation from a respectful distance. Reports came back confirming the identity of the missing person, corroborating the events surrounding the car and its burial. The closure brought relief to the family, a resolution that had seemed impossible for years. He was quietly satisfied knowing that his curiosity and persistence had contributed to this outcome. The metal detector, the initial digging, and the moments of anticipation had all led to this pivotal revelation. The backyard slowly returned to its normal state, though he viewed it differently now. Each corner, each patch of soil, reminded him that beneath the surface there were always stories waiting to be discovered. His hobby continued, but with a new respect for the weight of what might be uncovered. He walked the yard thoughtfully, reflecting on the strange and unexpected journey that had transformed a simple weekend pastime into a life-changing discovery. In the months that followed, he shared the story sparingly, choosing carefully when and with whom to speak. The discovery remained personal, a profound experience that had changed the way he viewed the world and the secrets it held. The experience had taught him patience, humility, and the importance of paying attention to the details often overlooked. He realized that life had a way of surprising those willing to explore and observe, revealing truths in places they least expected. Even as time passed, the memory of uncovering the car and the shocking truth within stayed with him. The backyard, once ordinary, had become a symbol of discovery, curiosity, and the responsibility that comes with uncovering hidden truths. He walked the yard often, the metal detector still by his side, but with a new awareness of the stories that lay beneath, waiting for someone to find them. Each beep, each sweep over the soil, was a reminder that life's mysteries often lay just below the surface, waiting to be revealed by those brave enough to seek them out.